Renaissance podcast. A whole lot going on this week. It's been a pretty active week.
Well, in news, the backwards reactionary monarchy of Qatar is in hot water because they may lose their 2022 World Cup hosting rights due to one, just blatant bribery that's coming out. And if it's happening in 2022, there's no way this story is going to keep any much longer. So people are already getting fired over that in FIFA. And two, it's way too hot to do anything in the summer. Play a soccer game? Are you kidding me? It's like 220 degrees.
Die.
And the labor standards are just terrible.
Yeah, just like feeding
slave labor.
Nepalese, just migrants who die by the hundreds.
Can't go home. They get their passports stolen. Yeah. Also, it's happening this week in Brazil, the World Cup, and sort of a big campaign is we don't need soccer, and it's like a picture of a kid with the dilapidated, living in a slum. We don't need this. And it's true. We always tons of money for huge sporting events, but not a lot for any public works that could actually improve people's lives. I mean, the money comes out so quickly for something like that, or like an Olympics bid. Yeah, just the wad of cash. Oh, here's a billfold. Just how much you need. Here's $2.5 billion up front. No questions asked. We got it. Yeah. This will not only grease the palms of contractors, but also keep the middle class more and more stupefied. Yeah, it's not working as well, though. Another headline is the U.S. GDP puzzle. Is this a temporary drop or something more serious? This is from The Guardian. Last week, there was even with all the doctored statistics of them trying to make, doctoring GDP numbers, doctoring unemployment statistics, all of this stuff, they just couldn't quite doctor it enough to show that the economy was growing. And it showed the economy had dipped by 1%. So no growth, and it dipped 1%, which was pretty stunning. That, we've been in an economic depression for about 6-7 years now. Yeah. And it has not abated at all. Just gotten worse, really. Yeah, it's gotten worse. It's kind of like treading water with the innovations in technology, and those things are kind of like feeding enough productivity growth and investment growth and new jobs and new enterprises and fields and whatnot to kind of tread water a bit. But there has been no recovery at all, and we're still in an ongoing depression that gets worse and worse. And now they can't even really hide it in the statistics anymore. And these idiots on the business magazines are like, what? How is this? What? What happened? How did the market implode? How did GDP go down by 1%? Because they live in the world of finance, and to them, the recession was over in 2009. Yeah, because that's when all that tidal wave of QE money started rushing in and inflating the markets, and that's all they care about, right? I mean, that's their everything. So to them, it's over. Convincing them of otherwise, I guess, even the doctors. Well, you're never going to convince them to do anything. They're never going to be like, oh, there's never going to be a moment where people like that are going to change sides and be like, no, I think there's economic development and a living wage and peace and things like that. That's not going to happen. So I mean, as long as their asset bubbles are in positive leverage and inflating, then that's definitely true. Something. On that topic, though, also their position of austerity and depression is super emboldened by, reading just the various periodicals, the Western anti-Chinese that have it out for China, because they want to clip their wings and make sure they don't become a global competitor. Yeah. Is that they're using this? They're not going to be able to do. Yeah, they're not going to be able to do it. And so they're using this global depression they see it as a battering ram, and if they can knock down GDP growth in China enough, they think that the newfound middle class there will somehow rally to the cause of liberal capitalist democracy, quote unquote, or just being basically integrated into the Western fold, and a total arresting of a trajectory of progress and an intention to improve their people and their people's condition. They think they can get away with it. They really think they can pull it off, and it's just utterly fantastic. I mean, how delusional these people are. And, part of that is obviously pinning them down to energy, and that can't be overstated. Of how China's had to modify their whole economy to get the petrodollars, so they've had to condition their economy to low-wage labor to get those USDs so they could turn around and buy the oil. Now, the more integration with Russia and China on the oil front weakens that, and the advent of fracking even weakens that significantly. And then also on top of that, like I like to harp on because it's a really hopeful point and will alter human history very soon, is their total push for high-level nuclear, which is going to undercut radically their need for those petrodollars and therefore their need to maintain this really artificial condition that they put their economy in. So China, it hasn't even got started yet. When they're able to start actually getting away from that model of the low-wage export shop of the world, that's when they're actually going to start taking off again. 10% economic growth, shit, they're going to hit like 20% economic growth year over year once those things start going into place. And at that point, it'll be clear to the elites of the West, of the NATO sphere, that, wait a minute, this isn't going to work. And the longer we just try to maintain this global depression for these purposes, we're just going to be left in the dust. So I think that's really when the trajectory is going to turn, because now the global economic depression is really, when you look at oligarchy and how it sees the chess game, it's being used right now in the EU it has been historically used to create these radical right-wing, racist, xenophobic political parties. That's starting to reverse already. It's used in the United States to smash the domestic labor force, so that's just a huge win for Wall Street. And then in the world, it's used to smash their enemies. So that will change soon, and so get ready to take advantage of it.
Yeah, certainly. You're not going to be able to cling on to the past and win. We're still using.
When has that ever worked?
Yeah, no, boo crop rotation.
Yeah, just grow nothing but tobacco until you are living in a desert.
Yeah, I just don't think that the ruling class is ever going to figure it out in time.
Well, it's almost like you don't have to convince them, but they're institutionalized in their political structure of that position erodes significantly by these shifts, right? So it's not like they're like Dick Cheney's going to feel a fluttering in his breast of the warmth of humanity, and it's just almost that that position becomes so untenable that the more rational elements of the ruling class fall by the wayside, and that they're kind of swept away. So I mean,
wait, the rational elements get swept away, or they get
no?
More power?
They will no longer be part of that coalition. Which
you can kind of see it already with the neocons and how they've been shunned from the acceptable members of the ruling class society.
Yeah,
I guess that'd be a good example to use.
Yeah, definitely, and it's you read Foreign Affairs magazine, and it's really clear in there. And you really realize how horrible the neocons are. I mean, even with the CFR group, being kind of center-left imperialism or whatever you want to call it, man, the neocons are so much worse.
They're really bad.
It's like giant ground war. It's almost like the Colonel Blimps of Britain who wanted to build just more battleships, right? It's more battleships. We need more battleships, or even when you look at the fact we have 11 carrier divisions, right? It's near technologically obsolete, and then your idea is to just maintain more and build more of the past model. And then these people back before World War I, they were building these big giant, huge battleships and whatever. And of course, as soon as the aircraft carrier came around,
yeah,
I was
first the dreadnought and then aircraft carrier.
Yeah, right. The past model people clinging. It's always just kind of funny. To just finish up on that thorium front, there is a really good anti-Helen Caldicott video that the guys over at the Energy from Thorium group did. It's 2 hours long. It's really good. It's the latest from Gordon McDowell. Really good. Share it on Facebook. Share it with your friends. Check it out. It's quite watchable. And Helen Caldicott's antics are just out of this world, right? She's the foremost anti-nuclear power advocate, I guess, to put it politely. And just if you can take this woman seriously after watching this video, and the anti-humanism of her, really, how she just loathes the better aspects of humanity, it's just laid out on a platter. which is good because these guys need to be going after these demagogue freaks that are put out on parade to maintain status quo power and authority. That's the only reason why she has this giant platform to speak. And, it's continually be perpetuated with the foundation and the money, wherever her money comes from and all that stuff. It's, it's media access, right? Like, why do these people have an inroad to, like, getting on the news and getting on talk shows and radio shows, like, whenever they like? That's the question. Regardless if she believes that stuff or not, like, that's not relevant because it can be proven false. And then also, like, you look at the political interest that it's perpetuating. What do you think about Obama saying that they're going to keep, God, how many troops was it in Afghanistan now?
So I'm on prospect.org. Yeah, the war continues forever until this ruling class is just going to keep doing this stuff.
I like how they, even within the headline, it's like, well, we're going to keep 12,000 troops there after the war. It's like, well, that's really not the end of a war.
Yeah, it's just, well, I mean, you garrison your empire base, but
I guess
that's what you have to do. I mean, I don't know what you're even going to do with 12,000 troops in Afghanistan except stay on your base and patrol within X amount of miles that you can. You're not going to have, like, what are you even going to do there with 12,000 guys?
Ship that heroin, baby.
I guess. Jesus.
Well, in the past year of Afghanistan heroin trafficking news, you saw that the Karzai brothers were basically, and just the political sentiment of the country is basically like, U.S., you've been here for over a decade. Time to get the fuck out. And Karzai's brother is, the biggest, like, opium lord, I guess, in the region.
Sure.
Or maybe even in the world. And,
yeah, probably. Something like, she's probably up there.
Yeah, huge drug kingpin. So they, are either political opportunists and all that stuff, of course, but maybe they were looking to, like, kick the CAA faction, the Western faction out and say, hey, we're going to keep all this money for ourselves. Or we're going to take a bigger cut. You're going to have to take a kind of secondary role in the heroin trafficking money. There's also the lack of ability to get the heavy hardware out because Russia will no longer let them use the Trans-Siberian railways.
Oh, that's right.
And they can't go through Pakistan, and clearly they can't go through Iran unless they want to start a world war. So they're kind of stranded there. If they want to, not bring their, billions of dollars of equipment, that's a big problem. But will the American people just sit by and let that happen? There's already congressional resistance against it, pushing back. Alan Grayson and Jeff Merkley and other people were saying, this is ridiculous. If we want to keep 10,000 troops in Afghanistan, we need to have a vote on this. What are the American people going to say? Incredibly sick of war, and they're ready for this to be over. As Obama said he was going to deliver on, so now he's reversing. And we can be wary for a lot more capitulations by Obama over the next 2 years because 40% approval rating, the economy dipping by 1% GDP, we're still in an economic depression. So, like, his basis for support is going to keep withering. And unless he gets the gall up, or even other factions like Elizabeth Warren, which I can just segue into this, the Bank on Students Loan Fairness Act right now is getting huge traction. That's and people need to put bank on students, and the first thing that comes up is Wells Fargo Bank, student loans. It's like, as an ad. It's funny. Okay. I'm
on this thing called prospect.org, and it's doing a story I found it from a Reddit economics forum. And it's first thing, it had a big pop-up ad, but like for a political campaign, like those type of pop-up ads, and it said fight for the new minimum wage, stand with Warren in Congress. So it was on the front page of an economics forum on Reddit. So
yeah,
there's certainly a push for it, and they're talking about like New Deal stuff and things that used to be completely can't talk about them. And so there certainly is like something happening, and the key is to use this momentum in a way to ensure prosperity for the most amount of Americans you just can.
Yeah, and Obama will be less able or less willing, just personally.
He's not going to fight anymore.
But he'd be less willing to capitulate to just like total last minute, like Clinton-esque sellouts, like bombing Yugoslavia, like expanding NATO, repealing Glass-Steagall, you know. Like these last like midnight hour sellouts will be less likely if Obama has decent standing there's a danger in having him have his last year of office and have a 25% approval rating. Because at that point, it's like, what does he have to lose? So if things like the Elizabeth Warren Bank on Students' Loan Fairness Act pass, then the likelihood for huge sellouts on the executive level are lessened. So now's the time to get busy with all this stuff with raising the minimum wage, even the federal one for 1010. That's a start.
Yeah.
Or the Bank on Students' Loan Fairness Act is a huge thing to push.
In Seattle, the city council just approved for a $15 minimum wage.
Yep.
They're in Seattle,
leading the pack.
See, and in this article, you can already tell it's got cracks in it. It's talking about how the economy recovered after the Great Depression. And this is a section from it called Learning from the Good War. One vivid, positive experience in our collective memory suggests how the economy could be drastically different. World War II, even more than the New Deal, profoundly altered the economy in ways that generated a more equal society with more opportunity and security than the ones we have today. These structural changes reinforced one another and affirmed government as a friend of the common person. The war was first a massive macroeconomic stimulus. Unemployment was still more than 14% in 1940. Thanks to more than $100 billion of war production orders in the first 6 months of 1942, more than the entire gross domestic product of 1939, joblessness vanished. War also recapitalized industry, which had languished during the Great Depression, and gave government a central place in developing science and technology. Well, you can do that without going to war. World War II was a failure, letting that happen. And if you would have had a more ambitious and a no-holds-barred economic recovery, like, let's say, the $100 billion that was needed during the war years, you could have gotten all this stuff, all the technology. That's something that this article doesn't bring up. It continually goes towards really narrow thinking about that sort of era in history.
Did the World War II save us from the Great Depression?
Yeah.
That's like the bumper sticker level of history.
Sure, absolutely. The war was not just a huge job program, but an unprecedented jobs training program. President Franklin Roosevelt also chose to use war production to increase the power of unions as full-scale partners. A company that wanted defense contracts had to recognize its unions. So you could do that today, though, if you had a strong president that would really drastically alter the economy if you...
Yeah, and that stuff's even matriculating up or just coming up through this kind of populist uprising of getting decent economically populist people in the House and Senate. So I got an email this morning with probably nearly 30 co-sponsors in the Senate for the version of the Bank on Students' Loan Refinancing Act, where she's looking to allow the Federal Reserve to open up a credit window so everyone can refinance the $1.2 trillion of student loan debt that is basically destroying a generation of people. Mm-hmm. And you're not going to have human beings populating this country much longer if people don't reproduce. And you have a demographic crunch like they have in these other countries. Korea's is, I think, one of the worst. It's like 1.2 or 1.3. If people can't have families, buy a house, get a job, just have normal lives because they're debt slaves, then you're going to have a huge problem with demographic implosion, desperation, just well-being of the population and the kind of people you're going to be bringing up, as debt slaves. It's just a rotten environment. We can do better than that. Why should we put up with this? Oh yeah, that's right. To please the Austrian gods of the free market. I forgot. My apologies.
Well, that's certainly the ideology this sort of debt peonage uses as a way to cloak what it's actually, just to give some sugar to the bullshit you have to with the insane amount of debt that students now get. And the incredibly negative side effects that it has on the society in general that aren't really being talked about.
Yeah. The gloom, the doom, the depression, the increase of pharmaceutical drugs and just alcohol, any kind of substance abuse from depression, from feeling completely having no hope, all that stuff. It just, rots the soul and heart of your country out. And that's what's going on. But the libertarians want to say, oh, well, you shouldn't have took that debt on. Well, what about the Federal Reserve that's puking $85 billion into the stock market every month to maintain a giant asset bubble of derivatives? Well, that shouldn't exist either. Okay. But all this debt was created under this phony auspice of free, infinite, 0% credit from the Federal Reserve. Mm-hmm. So the money you were borrowing was available and highly available and facilitated by creating quote-unquote funny money, if you want to have that definition. So shouldn't that funny money be written off as well as, the power to do this all in one fell swoop? You're going to leave behind the mess that it created, but if you close the leak in the dam, or you fix the sewer pipe that's spraying out all this rotten debt, then you're going to just leave everyone just with the results of that and not clean that up as part of the problem, part of the same solution. Clearly.
So at the very end of this article, it says, for many young Americans, today's urgent issue are the twin risks of global climate change, and depressed economic horizons. That's the big one. For some in the green movement, reduced material consumption is salutary because it is necessary to reduce the environmental toll. The Chinese aren't going to do this. I don't know. We're not going to plastic bottle our way. Nuclear energy, that's a way to do it. You want to reduce your carbon footprint, get some thorium reactors. But after 6 years of belt tightening, more austerity is for the young is no rallying cry. A more stirring prospect is the use of public investment in technology to allow good living standards at much lower cost to the planet. That's certainly possible. Sooner or later, the existential threat we all face will require a vast mobilization of public resources and the restoration of public purposes. A rendezvous is waiting to happen between the climate emergency and the need for good jobs and careers. Perhaps the new social movement will make this dream mainstream cause. Possibly the next president will. And then it ends without any solutions how to do it. Investments in science paid for by low interest credit from the Federal Reserve, a 1% Wall Street sales tax. You'll get health care from that. Probably 0% interest on all student loans. Infrastructure program. Let's explore the ocean. Let's map that out 100%. Make that be a national interest. Space program, investment in technology there, public-private partnerships with the technology that's developed through NASA and other space organizations, go right into the private sector so that, innovations in consumer goods can continue to rise. I mean, these are real things that can happen today if there was the right leadership.
Yeah.
I mean, these are all political issues. We have a government that is so choked with incompetence and corruption, it cannot function in a rational, logical way. It will just continue to look at bridges collapsing and be like, oh, well.
My gated community is great, thanks. The good thing about that story is that when the demagogues get on stage and they say, oh, we need more austerity, people are just basically now just rolling their eyes and booing, and it doesn't get any traction anymore. I mean, back in the day, 08, 09, 2010, you could make arguments for shared sacrifice, all this garbage, of course. But, people are willing to, they think something bad's happening to their country and they're willing to they're told that I got to give something up. But when that's just
of most people is that they feel connected and they feel that it's okay to take a hit if we all can rise above this thing. But
yeah, the cons that are running that, they're like, oh, these suckers, wow, they're so gullible, This can't just be the endless platform of both political parties, more austerity. Be it through, we need to cut back on carbon emissions, we need to go back a few hundred years in technological progress, or from the right-wing version of some kind of monetarist argument always wrapped up with some kind of, dollar sign and some passing slogans about, markets this, markets that. And people aren't just buying it anymore, which is great. So next step, that they're not buying the phony solutions peddled by the establishment. Time to start developing solutions, and we have them in spades. Here is, I found it actually. It's the bankonstudentsbill.com, and the headline here is, Student loan debt is crushing young people. Total debt is now $1.2 trillion, more than all outstanding credit card debt in America. The overwhelming burden of student debt keeps young people from buying homes, buying cars, starting small businesses, saving for retirement, and making purchases that strengthen our economy. Well, yeah, but no mention of, at least they can say that much, the demographic problems it's creating and the kind of spiritual problems it's creating in the country. They won't mention that, but at least they'll mention, hey, right-wing reactionaries, this is even self-destructive to you to have this perpetuation of this debt because these people aren't consumers anymore. They're just debt slaves. So, anyway, continuing. Last year, the vast majority of Republicans agreed that federal student loan interest rates were far too high, and Congress lowered the rates this year for new borrowers. But nothing was done for the millions of people still stuck with existing high interest rate loans. We should give students and their families a fair shot to afford college education without crushing debt by giving borrowers the opportunity to refinance their student loan debt to the same lower prices agreed upon for new student loan debt borrowers this year. So it's not nearly as ambitious as the original bill, but by that same token, it has, this is a lot of co-signers, and then all the Senate. Elizabeth Warren, Patrick Leahy, Carl Levin, Jay Rockefeller, Barbara Boxer, Patty Murray, Dick Durbin, Jack Reed, Mary Landrieu, Chuck Schumer, Cantwell, Bob Menendez, Ben Cardin, Bernie Sanders, Sherrod Brown, Claire McCaskill, Sheldon Whitehouse, Mark Udall, Tom Udall, Jeff Merkley, Al Franken, Tammy Baldwin, Edward Markey, and Cory Booker, and among others. So a big list of people. This is a start. This isn't like the triumph of the Morrill Act or anything like that, or Glass-Steagall or anything on that nature, but it's a start. Mm-hmm. So there is populist momentum here. Let's get behind it.
From the EPI, which is the Economic Policy Institute.org, has a new article out called Raising Americans' Pay, Why It's Our Central Economic Policy, and it's by Josh Bivens, who is that economist that talks about public investment, sort of hesitantly with like a umbrella to like shield him from like tomatoes being thrown at him.
He is so matter of fact, though.
He's pretty great. You can never lose sight of the actual goal, and that is, a New Deal renaissance, really. So something we're working on is trying to give historical context for, the current situation. Like, we're reading Henry Charles Carey, who was Lincoln's economic advisor, stuff written in like the late 1840s and 1850s. And so, giving an overview of what's going on in the world, why this person is writing this. His goals are pretty like self-stated. One of his books is like ending the slave trade. That's the title. So that's going to be the goal. One of the goals of this is giving like lots of context for the situation that we're in right now, and how we can get out of it without a disaster.
It's definitely the central focus. So today, Robert Ford, which was kind of John Negroponte Jr., brought up, schooled in the ways of creating death squads, counter gangs by John Negroponte, the notorious, he was in the Reagan administration, both Bush administrations, I think. One of those kind of shadow government spooks, basically.
Yeah. And a figure that's like in and out, really, really high power, plays positions and disappears and like goes in.
Like James Baker or someone like that,
Yeah. I mean, Kissinger's like the best example of that sort of type of person.
Yeah, exactly. Right. The archetype of
like
that model.
Hanging out and then like goes and makes like $1 billion and then like back in government, start this war.
So Robert Ford resigned kind of in protest, I guess in protest, sure, and immediately started speaking out about the Obama administration's choices on what to do with regards to Syria. Who would be surprised by such a thing? I guess the LaRouches would be, because their fantastic thesis is that somehow Obama is the biggest warmonger and like Dempsey is holding him back. I don't know. It gets even weirder from there. Rather than Obama just being kind of like pushed and dragged along as a tail on a kite.
Yeah, he doesn't want to do anything. Yeah. He's just so worried about losing his position that he's just like kind of give the least amount of he can, so because he doesn't want to get impeached.
Yeah, so he's just riding a fine line between proto-fascist Tea Party in a Congress and an insane petty bourgeois middle class, a world economic depression, a collapsing empire, all this stuff. Barkey is not the source of the warmongering, because if he was, it would be a war.
War with Syria.
Come on, it's that simple, really. Go back and read all my stuff on my blog when that was all unfolding, and you could really see, because it was on such public display of like how this stuff actually works. I called it a jockeying bunch of criminals just trying to out-lie, basically out-manipulate, out-lie, out-cynic the other person. And that's what like Samantha Power and Susan Rice and John Kerry all looked like. Just trying to get over the next person of like, I'm the bigger warmonger than you. I'm going to get more favor by the imperial establishment for pushing for war. And Obama could have took the plunge, but he didn't. And he went to Congress and then didn't even call Congress back quickly let them just like come back over a week later. If he wanted to go to war, he wouldn't have gone to Congress to act, first of all. And then if he did, he would have called them back immediately, so all the hysteria could have still been in the air, and the chances for pushing war at that early stage were much higher. When you had a week of activism, Twitter, all that stuff, everyone inoculating the public opinion against the lies.
Yeah.
We had time to reverse that trajectory. And now, if Obama was the biggest warmonger, why would he have allowed that time? He's just looking out for himself.
Yeah.
So that should be clear from the whole Syrian thing. And if you're not seeing that, you need to go relook at the information because it's quite evident. Anyway, so Robert Ford, bigger warmonger than Obama, is now resigning in protest because Obama didn't pull the trigger on the Syrian excursion, right? So how's this factoring into some fantastic theses people have regarding Obama and war? So he's resigning today. This is from NPR. Our high-tech,
bad to very bad to still worse.
Audio
and
here.
The measures we have taken have been, in most cases, too little and too late.
Is your main criticism that the U.S. failed to back the opposition to the Syrian regime with arms and with military training?
Absolutely. That's one of my big criticisms. From the beginning of the armed opposition, they sought help from outside countries, and they were very quickly competing for recruits, competing with Al-Qaeda groups who had better funding and they could get ammunition. And so now we have...
Better funding from who? They're the Qatar, Saudi Arabia, puppet states of big oil.
So right out the gate, he says, we should have done more, we should have been bigger warmongers. So here's Robert Ford criticizing Obama for not being as big of a warmonger as he should have been.
Pretty serious Al-Qaeda problem in Syria, and we were very slow to react to that.
What kind of arms, what kind of ammunition should the U.S. have been providing to more moderate Syrian opposition groups?
Even something, it doesn't even always have to be arms, Robert. Just providing cash, just providing ammunition would allow and would have allowed groups that are not ideologically close to Al-Qaeda, would enable them to compete for recruits. And most Syrians are not Islamic fanatics, but there are a lot of them.
Shipped in those fighters from Libya
like 32 nationalities of foreign fighters there. It's like almost 31 flavors of Baskin-Robbins ice cream.
Yeah. And really do want to fight the regime, and so they'll join whatever group offers them material resources to do that.
As you've said, you feel you can no longer defend U.S. policy in, say, 2011, 2012, within the State Department. Were your views that we should have armed the moderate opposition, or have your own views changed over the years?
Without going into great detail on the internal deliberations inside the United States government, which I don't think is appropriate here, I think it would be fair to say that many officials, including General Dempsey, have noted that the State Department, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, have noted that the State Department was advocating years ago that we provide greater material assistance to the armed opposition, and I would certainly not disagree with that.
But the resulting policy, was it one that you felt comfortable defending at that time, or have things been aggravated since then?
I thought that if you work inside the system, you can bring change to the policies. You can move them in the
last administration, we got war when I wanted it. In this one, we didn't. So now I'm angry about
He's
that.
like, I was going through the right channels.
All the right channels for war.
Yeah.
I can't believe it.
I was a good boy, but maybe I should have went with the secret faction and tried to overthrow Obama.
Your way in there.
Yeah, exactly.
Through reasoned argument. And at a certain point, after the Geneva talks failed, by then there was nothing left that we could do, and so I think that was an appropriate time for me to leave. And I think it is time, really, for the administration to reconsider where it is going in Syria. Events on the ground are dynamic. We're not going in a good direction.
One criticism that's been raised about the Geneva Conference is that its failure was not very surprising, and should so much emphasis have been placed on a process that would encourage the rebels to continue fighting, to try to gain more ground, to be in a better position, when indeed the Assad regime was just not going to budge, no matter how much international pressure was brought.
Well, first of all, I don't think it's accurate to say that foreign countries were inciting the armed opposition to...
He doesn't think it was accurate to say that foreign countries were inciting opposition. Although that's literally and utterly exactly what happened. The media blitz that they tried to do in 2012, from just every aspect of everything, facilitated by Turkey, facilitated by Saudi Arabia, the Gulf states, and by the U.S., and the British and the French. Don't forget them. And, of course, Israel. So all those countries were totally complicit, up to their eyeballs in blood, and blithely dismisses that as what's going on, but also at the same time saying we were giving them weapons, we should have given them more weapons. So just totally contradicting himself.
This is the regime. The Syrians themselves, there are lots of them that are perfectly ready to fight the regime with or without foreign assistance. We've seen that since 2012. But we had hoped at Geneva that the co-sponsor of the talks, Russia, would put enough pressure on the regime that it would come to the table and discuss, negotiate, setting up a new...
That's amazing how... If they really actually thought that, I don't know if that's just some kind of saying of they thought they could, cajole, kind of blackmail, threaten Russia to like giving in to some concessions. But, that's one thing to say that. But if they actually really thought that was going to be the case, they're totally fucking insane.
Yeah. I think that was just a shot at Russia. Just, as always, in any sort of chance to take a shot at Russia, you got to do it.
Right.
Government. It was on that basis that Ban Ki-moon, Secretary General of the United Nations, sent in December an invitation to both the Syrian opposition and the Syrian government to come to Geneva to negotiate.
Remember that?
Creating. And
then they said, no, you can't bring him here because it's against our overall plan to flip Iran as soon as we can.
Yeah. That was great.
You're going to bring that one up there, Robert Ford?
Yeah. It's like we cordially invited these other people, and then Ban Ki-moon invited the person we don't like to our little tea party, and we freaked out.
Yeah, it's a peace conference. It's not a birthday party.
And new government. That was the basis of the talks. It became very clear by February that the Russians either could not or would not put enough pressure on the Assad government to compel it to...
Why would they give up their only warm water port in the Mediterranean? You know how much money and goods they ship through the Suez Canal? They're just going to give up their Syrian port because of what?
Yeah, what are they going to get out of it?
Yeah,
some sweet lies told by Obama or something like that, or Robert Ford.
And that are soon going to be whispered in their ear about Iran next.
Yeah. So don't listen to what we just did and said about destroying your ally in the Middle East. Now it's time to go to war against Iran, and we're hoping you'll help us out.
And the talks fell apart.
Is it possible that you're an Arabist, so this wouldn't be your prime brief here, but is it possible that what we've seen in Syria, as with what we've seen in Ukraine and what we may yet see in dealing with Iran, that the biggest policy miscalculation wasn't about what was happening in Damascus, it's about what's happening in Moscow and what we can expect from the Russians in various different arenas?
Well, I think many of us felt disappointment that the Russians in Geneva did not weigh in more strongly with the Syrian government delegation in Geneva, and so we're very disappointed about that. I also think, Robert, it's fair to say that the Russians have a very different view of what's happening in the Middle East. They are alarmed by the growth of Al-Qaeda. I think that is a genuine interest that we and the Russians
why aren't we alarmed by it?
Yeah, what's up with us?
However, whereas we see Assad as the root,
giving weapons to them.
Yeah. Al-Qaeda is our enemy over here, but over here they're our friend.
Cause of the Al-Qaeda problem in Syria. That is to say, we see he is a magnet.
See how the script has been flipped, though? Last August, during the chemical weapons attack, it was John Kerry. Remember his famous quote saying, like, "Oh, Al-Qaeda, there's no Al-Qaeda in Syria." And then Putin actually getting on TV and saying, John Kerry's just a total liar. Like, main government heads of state calling each other liars. That's real strong stuff. So now, even the little Robert Ford is admitting, yes, there is Al-Qaeda there. They are there. We did that.
Yeah.
The American population did that and changed the dialogue. We exposed the propaganda, and they couldn't run on that big lie anymore. And they have to have that for the wars. So, give yourself a pat on the back if you're a part of that process. And if you weren't, learn that this, it isn't some kind of darkened room where, the Rothschilds have all these dials and buttons and are controlling everything like in this literalist fashion or something like that. Yeah. It's dynamic, and the population has to be acted on in these ways of creating these lies, and it can be countered, and it was.
Pulling in jihadis to fight against him. The Russians seem to view Assad as a bulwark against Al-Qaeda, and they ignore the cooperation between the regions.
He absolutely is a bulwark against Al-Qaeda.
They've been slaughtering Al-Qaeda forces in all these cities and countrysides of Syria for the past 3 years.
Regime and Al-Qaeda that dates back to the time of the American troop presence in Iraq.
Looking to the future, when you talk about
American
getting
troop
back
presence in
to
Iraq,
the
can we
negotiating
stop that
table.
for a second? You mean the American invasion of Iraq? The American troop presence.
Yeah.
That's...
The euphemisms are getting
God.
better and better.
It's like there's that great George Carlin bit where he's like, it first was called shell shock.
Yeah.
Then it was called battle fatigue.
Yeah.
Then
Now it's post-traumatic stress disorder. Clinicalizing brutal things.
How many years do you think that would take? How many more years of fighting would the rebels require before they could deal sufficient blows to get the regime back to talking? Or to talking, as I say, not back.
Yeah. First of all, it pains me to even have to say it because it means that a lot of people are going to die. And Syria was a beautiful country.
Robert
People
Ford,
who
humanitarian.
visited know how wonderful its cities were and the fabulous historic monuments there.
From his
entire career, really.
Yeah, and the career of who he was the protege of.
Paterfamilia.
Yeah, exactly. Negroponte. So, I mean, the weird thing is, does this guy really believe this, or is he just a complete cynical, evil bastard? It's kind of open for question, I guess. I mean, he just sounds like he's totally convinced that whatever we give weapons to are freedom fighters, and they're fighting against tyranny somewhere, against some brutal dictator, quote unquote. I mean, does he really believe this? It almost seems like he does. I don't know. It's very, if he does, it's even more kind of bizarre and horrifying.
Many of them dating back to stories about St. Paul, for example. So it pains me to say that the fighting will have to go on, but it's going to. I mean, even today, the day after the elections, there's fighting up around Aleppo.
In another 2 or 3 years, do you think?
And so I think it's going to take at least a year to 2 years before the regime itself understands that this is a war that they cannot, from which they cannot impose their terms, but they will have to negotiate terms.
I don't see how they see that on the ground.
Yeah, me neither. I don't
without
know.
Turning into a much wider regional war.
Yeah, I don't know. In the current situation, even if you, let's say you gave the fighters a bunch of modern technology weapons, even then, I don't think they could win, even come close to winning.
Eventually they're going to run out of psychotic dupes and Wahhabist fanatics. There's not just an inexhaustible supply of those people just waiting around to be turned into...
in Team America in that bar when he goes into just a bunch of jihad bars to go fight in Syria. Yeah. Robert Ford. So that... For what? Why, has he even said why he wants... I mean...
Yeah, maybe they're keeping a high level of drone strikes going on in these other countries to piss people off enough to... I don't know how that follows into attacking Assad, but hey, some of these people that the prisoners that they caught, Saudi Arabia and other areas, the propaganda there is so rich. Every channel is like an Islamic version of Rush Limbaugh or something like that. That the amount of delusion of what those people think Assad's about is pretty significant with some of the ones that they caught. So I don't know how they can turn that rage or that anti-Western sentiment over to fighting Assad. I don't know.
Ambassador Ford, thanks for talking with us.
My pleasure.
Robert Ford, Ambassador Ford, has resigned from the U.S. State Department. He was a U.S. ambassador to Syria. He's now
Now, the interesting thing about the resignation of Robert Ford is it a good thing or a bad thing? Well, It's good in the fact that this blood-covered warmonger is no longer in the administration. Now, who are they going to replace him with? That's kind of the bigger question. Is it someone going to be even more? Robert Ford was just talking about arming rebels, facilitating support, supplies. He wasn't saying we got to immediately go to war in Syria. So if he gets replaced with someone that's of that line, that's obviously a
big red flag and
turn for the worse. Yeah. Now, if it's replaced by someone more moderate and conciliatory, then that's a huge plus. Maybe we can weed some of these other vitriolic, puking warmongers out of the Obama administration. Which is the problem. I'm just going to hit on the LaRouche people again. Which is the problem when you put a Hitler mustache on the president, like a year or two into his presidency, then you're so invested in that being the case, and like inexorably like that is some unrecoverable position, that the nuanced complexities of an unfolding world economic depression and collapsing empire and shifting geopolitical relations can't take root, right? Because you're already saying, oh, this guy's Hitler.
Yeah.
So, based on what? On some kind of thing of he is going to bring in World War III? Well, in the case of Syria, he could have took the plunge, and he did not.
Did not.
And if you want to look at Dempsey is his general. He's the guy that he appointed and that he had out in front and that he was supporting the whole way. So that just doesn't add up. And, that's the problem. How could you assign such character to anyone and just box them into this thing and just say it's, that cut and dry? It's just silly. There's another thing to cover. They want to critique Asian, basically, deposits. So it's saying Asia's state firms have been damaged by graft and incompetence. In April, Song Lin, the boss of China's Resources, a big diversified SCO, was placed under investigation for corruption. Coal India has underinvested in equipment and dug up too little coal, prompting a fuel crisis in India's power stations. During Vietnam's boom, in 2005 to 2010, some of its well-connected state firms got carried away, borrowing heavily and diversifying without good cause. A default by Venetian, a shipbuilder that had accumulated an astonishing $4 billion of debt, helped spark the banking crisis. Well, you want to talk about astonishing levels of debt, how about $2 quadrillion of derivatives?
Yeah.
That's a little bigger, right? So if you want to talk about bankruptcy and insolvency, look no further than Wall Street, who has just choked with credit default swaps, index future spread synthetic credit options, just any kind of derivative you can think of, and then the hyper trading and everything that's based on that, right? So that's a much worse basis. They're talking about heavy industrial companies that maybe got too much in on the cheap credit of the pre-2008 crunch, that are still lumbering under some of those debts. But that's like a real thing. Those are real companies that can create real jobs, real value, real production.
Yeah.
What's J.P. Morgan good for? So we should be careful while we're throwing stones.
I'm on CNN Money right now, and as of June 4th, I got this from Reddit. It was also their news site. Walmart workers strike in major cities. Walmart workers Wednesday joined strikes in several major cities. Tampa, Miami, Chicago, Milwaukee, Minneapolis, Los Angeles, and San Francisco. Dayton, Ohio, Cincinnati, and essentially they're protesting the unlivable conditions that Walmart puts them in. Take home $1,200 a month, $500 goes to rent. The rest isn't enough to live decently.
Mm-hmm.
They even haven't mentioned proponents for high wage received a shot in the arm Monday when Seattle City Council passed an ordinance to gradually increase the minimum wage to $15 an hour. So these are some real positive changes that are happening right now.
Mm-hmm.
The key is to capitalize on this stuff.
Yeah, Alabama was protesting out front of the state capitol. People were lining up there to expand Medicaid because they're realizing, hey, these insane fascist Republican governors really are like the biggest activists about keeping this underclass going. Mm-hmm. And the problem with Obamacare, in these people's view, in the Republican governor's view and the oligarch's view, is that it raises the value and the condition of working people, and even in the process of paying off the major insurers, and of course being highly tilted towards them, it does have these positive aspects. So that's why they're against it. Here's another just great gem from The Economist. They just keep me always so tickled. Asia prospered over the past 2 decades by following a different economic model from the West's.
No wonder they prosper.
Yeah, they didn't want to become vassal slaves. But if it wants to continue to do well over the next 20 years, it will have to reform. They're like, yeah. So you didn't do what we said you should do, and you did great. But now it's time to do what we tell you should do. What that involves will vary place to place. Myanmar, a big country with a difficult past, is beginning to pull itself out of that mire. Meaning that the long-standing military government capitulated to the West and basically just surrendered. India and Indonesia, 2 chaotic democracies, have to create enough order to attract factories and industrial jobs.
Because they can't build their own stuff.
Yeah, because they're just fluttering by. And you say, hey, we have no labor rights. We have no child labor laws, and you can treat our people just as,
however you want.
Yeah, they're all wearing GIMP masks, so you just go to town. And you're like, all right, well, we'll park a factory here until the next person next door says, their people can be even more exploited. Continuing the article, in China, the government needs to ease its grip on the economy. Yeah, ease your grip. That's just great. Like, why the fuck would they? Not for their own benefit. Clearly for someone else's benefit, maybe. Japan is embarking on the world's biggest experiment to see whether a society can shrink and still remain prosperous.
Jesus. They can't answer me. They just try to come up with these ridiculous answers to these problems that we have. Like, maybe we'll just have less people. Yeah. Because we can't afford, people cannot afford to have families in Japan.
Yeah.
It's just very, very difficult to do.
Yeah, everything's incredibly expensive. And the property values have never came down as they should have. So, just this kind of, once again, almost administrative decisions. Like, Japan's like, 1989, they're like, hey, everybody, let's do this. Let's stop growing gangbusters because we're going to threaten the West, and they're getting kind of scared of us that we can surpass them. Because, at that point, we were already deep into Reagan and Bush Sr., so we were, like, totally set on a course for implosion, usury, destroying labor force, And Japan was going the other direction. But by this logic of this stupid Economist magazine, that they all just said, let's make this decision to just pour endless money into the financial aggregates, have a social implosion, price anyone out of actually reproducing and having a family, and that'll just be awesome. Let's just give it a shot. Crazy idea, guys. Let's just try it out. Anyway, here's the European election results. Most of Europe voted between the voter turnout was between some places as low as 20%, some places as high as over 60%, but the average is about 40 to 50%. But yet this magazine, like 3 or 4 times, mentions General Sisi in Egypt. Look at that. He only got 44% voter turnout. Meanwhile, that's the entirety of Europe, including Britain, where this is written. So, this total and utter hypocrisy. But that's not legitimate. I mean, it's just, selling what's good for the goose is good for the gander, right? They don't just...
I'm continuing to read the Matt Taibbi book, The Divide. And the part of Matt right now is he's going over short selling and the lengths that some of these high-powered Wall Street firms will go to destroy a company, no matter what. And it just shows, one, the way they make their money, anti-productive. It's a pillage model, and they don't care about anything else other than their bottom line. And it's something that is protected by, the highest powers that be. Supreme Court justices rule in favor of these Wall Street banks.
Let me guess which Supreme Court justices.
The Rats Cabal, of course. Roberts, Scalia, Alito, Thomas.
Yeah. With Kennedy on the side.
Of course. Is he Iraq Kennedy? Is he from the
I don't know.
the storied family?
I'm not sure. Probably.
We're at. Oh God.
Oh God.
One away from my car. Go to sleep.
Yeah, so talking about Tiananmen Square, and the West is doing all they can to, build this up, and things on NPR just running constantly. Oh, Tiananmen Square. Multiple documentaries have been made about that one guy that was standing in front of the tank. If you're going to try to go from surviving Mao and all the disastrous social and economic policies that he implemented in that country directly into a pluralistic democracy, when the vast majority of the population is in peasant life and in incredible poverty, that's just not going to work. That would have been the recolonization of China under different auspices, because the elites, the people out there protesting had something to lose. They weren't anyone that actually was going to be benefited by a nationalist system of economics. And so those were, the petty bourgeois at the time protesting for their supposed rights. But that's untenable in a society in which there's so much want and there's so much poverty. It just will not work. So
they're just trying to slow down China any way they can.
Yeah.
Because China is moving towards the future, and the West simply is not under the current system that it is. That it's under. It's one of the things we've been pointing out this show is how backward and how sort of surrender-oriented all the articles and all the sort of anointed voices are about the American economic system. What's going on right now. And then they immediately, in the same breath, turn around and go to China and see their incredible growth and try to sap it in any way that they can. Say that they're not doing this right, they're not doing that right.
So what is this force that's threatened by human progress, right? That's what it ultimately comes down to, is if any other country is doing good, or anything that they can't get their grip on must be destroyed. If it can't be controlled, it has to be destroyed. So this is the imperial force, like a force of gravity. It's as real as gravity in the physical realm. This is the gravity by which so many political things take shape.
Home stretch. Only 26 more minutes of this, probably less than that, though.
Gold standard. Not because we want it, right? The politicians will never want it, but they're going to be forced to adopt it because it's going to be the only way to end the chaos. But, it's like a chaperone at a high school prom, right? The kids don't want the chaperone there. Gold is the monetary chaperone. Fuck. Yeah, right. And the central bankers and the government wants to fuck us, but they can't do it on a gold standard. Touche. Right? They can't do it when we're on a gold standard. That's why they don't want it. That's why they...
I think there's a lot of interest that would want a gold standard. So right now, Wall Street's feeding at the trough of the public credit. They don't want the gold standard because they have the public credit, so they're able to. They have the golden goose that can lay the golden eggs. Now, having a gold standard mitigates and quote unquote solves some of those problems, but by creating more problems. It's like if I found out I had dry rot in my house and I say, I'm going to burn my house down. So I just get my flamethrower out, burn my house down. I'm like, I don't have dry rot anymore. Problem solved. Rather than actually looking at what is the solution to this problem. And, of course, Schiff once again strikes out.
Want funny money. Right.
Funny money or gold. Nothing, no compromise, no anything between these two polar opposites that he presents. Just false dichotomy every time, false dilemma, false choice. You pick between this horrible system or this other horrible system that benefits me more and you less.
It has nothing to do with the fact that you actually sell gold.
No, I sell gold because I believe in it. I'm going to I want to do the right thing for my clients.
I sell you these tulip bulbs because I believe in them.
I believe, yeah.
I believe in what benefits me because I believe in it. Once again, totally self-interest.
The clients, if I thought that they should own something else, I mean, oftentimes, it's easier to sell people what they want than what you think that they need. I mean, I actually built
He's doing a public service.
God bless you.
God, you're invested in what you're selling, and that's not a conflict of interest because you believe. He believes.
Business really in the late 1990s when everybody I talked to wanted tech stocks, and I used to spend all day and all night trying to talk people out of those stocks, saying, look, this is a bubble, you don't want to buy this is what you need, you should buy this, this company or this dividend, and it was difficult. A lot of my friends were making a lot more money than I was back then because they were just selling their clients what they wanted. But I make a lot more money than they do now because I took a long-term approach. I wanted to do what was right for my clients, not what made me the money in the short run. I was concerned about my reputation and building a lasting business beyond the tech bubble.
How are we attacking this, man? I feel so bad.
It was hard for me in 98, 99, 2000. But, but now I'm getting the same kind of thing again. Where now a lot of people are buying these social media stocks and, they're succumbing to the hype again. There's a lot of similarities between what's going on now in the markets and what was going on.
The problem with Schiff, though, is he throws in enough red meat in there and truth. It bamboozles a lot of people. Yeah, we live in a bubble economy, and this is the huge problem of the Federal Reserve. If you don't issue credit based on some kind of future ideal of what things can be, then what else are you going to be issuing credit on? It requires leadership, an idea of what you think the economy can be, and the people in power to be able to move to that destination. Look how China's been doing for the past 2 decades. Explosive growth, double-digit economic growth, massive urbanization, industrialization, massive increases in standard of living, health, accessibility to public pension systems, healthcare, education, energy consumption, all up, because that's their intention. If the intention is just to have a return, if you want an economic return based on nothing to do with actual general welfare of the people, that's what you get. You get a bubble economy. And so Schiff is very right in pointing out that that's undesirable. We don't want that. That's not anything anyone should want. It's just an endless Ponzi scheme in which it's an endless gambling deck, where you're just constantly, bust this time.
Get a new shoe.
Yeah, so the whole central focus, the whole central heart of your economy is just a giant casino. And we can do better than that.
We certainly can.
90s, people forget the past. They keep reliving it, even if it's recent. It shows you how worthless our schools are. I mean,
it's also not looking at the institutional problems that are creating said effects.
Yeah.
As if this is some kind of subjective, like we don't learn, like we're some kind of addict. We don't learn from our problems. Well, we can't learn from the problems because we haven't tackled the institutions creating the problems.
History, not only don't they know, history of 50 or 100 years ago.
But neither do you, Schiff. You say that everyone is, the Founding Fathers were against paper money. Utterly false, utterly, completely topsy-turvy, on its head, radically false.
People don't even know history from 5 or 10 years ago. That's how ignorant they are. What do you think about
people?
Bitcoin?
Get them, Schiff.
What do you think about cryptocurrencies? What do you think about
emerging? Oh, my God. No, not Bitcoin, please.
Bitcoin.
Here we go. We're in Bitcoin land now.
Look, there are a lot of people that are libertarian. There's some people that believe in hard money. There are people that believe in gold that are in Bitcoin. And, I think that...
Schiff's like, well, I'm not invested in it, so how am I going to work my way around this?
You could use it to buy gold.
He's like, I'm not invested in Bitcoin. I didn't buy low. I can't sell high because it's high now. I wouldn't recommend it. Yeah. Schiffco can't profit from this enterprise.
A lot of people who, bought Bitcoin a few years ago, and, I didn't buy it, and sure, I wish I had bought them. Because I would be selling them now. In fact, I would have already sold them. So I dumped it already?
Yeah.
Your Schiff He's like
a speculator. Just look, man. I don't really care as long as they buy low, sell high.
He's this kind of like lovable scoundrel. I could have thought wood, man, but man, missed that one. Too bad. Buy gold. Oh my God.
Because I think it's a bubble. I think that Bitcoin's already collapsed.
Do you hear what Vegas casinos, 2 casinos, just started?
Yeah. What is fundamentally any commodity? And I'd include cryptocurrency as a commodity, right? Because it's a limited supply. It meets a lot of the same criteria as gold. Within the Bitcoin universe, you can't manufacture any more Bitcoin. That's how the cryptocurrency works. It's the kind of like genius of it. It got me really excited in 2011. I knew about it. I was investing in it. I got out of it. I could have made millions of dollars off of it. So I'm speaking from experience of like having already invested in it and got out way too early before when it hit $1,000 or whatever. Mm-hmm. So I'm speaking from experience on that one, partially kicking myself, but, also seeing the ridiculousness of finance, right? That, like, just based on some kind of nonsensical gamble, like you could be worth millions of dollars, seems like it really exposes this is all just nonsense. It's all has nothing to do with reality. But also that Schiff, is basing his thing off of gold, and gold and Bitcoin are kind of like, they're kind of similar. Like, you want to say only Bitcoin is money, well, only gold is money. And if you want to say, another cryptocurrency could be in there, you could have Cosby coin. That was another one based on digital Bill Cosby's.
Really?
Yeah. And so, like, you could say, okay, silver is now money too, right? You could have bimetallism, where you have silver and gold, right? What's the difference? Well, not a heck of a lot. And I guess the difference is you can create unlimited different kinds of cryptocurrency. But fundamentally, like, cryptocurrency itself and gold and silver itself, in and of itself, has no economic value at all. I can't eat it. I can't use it to improve my life. I can't become more educated from it. I can't improve my human condition based on either one of these things. It's not energy, so I can't use it for any kind of energy consumption. I can't live in it. I mean, I guess you could. It'd be rather expensive. It would be unfunctional to have a house made of gold. But anyway, that these markets, these units of mark or units of account, that's all they are. So there's no fundamental value to them. And if you're not basing, once again, it just comes back to real economics over financial economics.
Accepting Bitcoins? Yeah, but I think merchants starting to accept Bitcoins are actually going to be negative for Bitcoins, not positive. Why is that? Well, here's why. When Bitcoins went up from pennies a coin to $1,000, right? You really couldn't do much with them except hoard them. So before you go,
like gold, like all this, just listen to everything Schiff's going to say, and just change the word Bitcoin with gold, and then realize that Schiff's on the gold position because he thinks that is exactly what Bitcoin did. And the only tragedy in this whole conversation is that Schiff wasn't long Bitcoin when it went big. That's, you want this guy to dictate to you what should be macroeconomic policy? This lovable thief, this charlatan that has a nice, he has this like William Crystal kind of perma shit-eating grin on his face. It's a guy it's hard to hate because he's just so despicable.
I'm sorry.
He's just like this.
Sorry to interrupt you,
Han Solo style guy.
What is a Bitcoin? It's worth whatever somebody
will
give you
gold,
for it. I mean, it has no actual value because you can't do anything with it.
Okay.
All you can do is give it to somebody else.
So is it in one?
Gold.
Is it in 1 Bitcoin, 2 Bitcoins?
Well,
what is the volume? What is the?
Well, they usually sell like 1 Bitcoin, but you can break a Bitcoin up into like 100,000 pieces of a Bitcoin.
Okay, but give me how much is a pizza?
Gold.
How many Bitcoins is a pizza?
Well, a fraction, because right now an entire Bitcoin right now is what, $950. So how many pizzas? A pizza's like $9.50. So you get like 100 pizzas.
They don't have any other thing other than a Bitcoin. That's it. It's just a Bitcoin.
Well, I mean, you can get Bitcoin. I mean, you can get fractional coins. You don't have to buy a whole coin.
Yeah, but
realize also that all the fundamental problems they're talking inherent to Bitcoin are exactly the same with gold. So you have price of Bitcoin fluctuating massively with its demand, which is denominated in dollars. So those problems are all inherent in a gold supply as well. That price is fixed, and if the economy grows and actually the amount of value in real, physical, tangible economic value is doubled, that can't be represented by gold because you can't guarantee any kind of supply of gold out of the ground. And so therefore that's all subject to all these massive speculative booms and busts and all this kind of stuff. The irony is Schiff is critiquing Bitcoin when his ideal system of a gold standard has all the same flaws.
To figure it out, you have to have like nickel, quarter.
No, it's just Bitcoin. You can have, I don't know, a deca coin, a centa coin. I don't know what they call it.
So it's the exact opposite.
Like, I'm not in it. I don't care.
Pesos is $1.
But the important thing is that you can't do anything with it. There's no actual value.
You can buy drugs right now, right?
Well, you get
Silk Road.
Yes, but you can spend it as long as somebody is willing to take it.
Right.
But there's no end user. It's not a commodity like
Isn't
gold.
that the same with our currency currently?
Pretty much. Yeah.
Well, our currency is crap. I mean, I'm not. Why would
Bitcoin is crap and our currency is crap?
Well, the difference between the crap the government issues and Bitcoins is the crap the government issues for now is legal tender. I can, people will accept it. I can pay my taxes in it. I mean, I have a use for it.
Right, but it's the government saying it's legal tender. I mean,
and the government enforcing.
But being someone who's so anti something like Bitcoin.
But Bitcoin it has no real value. I recognize that it could collapse. There's no history.
Everybody agrees there's a value. Isn't there a value? Just like we do.
Well, but tomorrow everybody can agree there's no value. See, gold was valuable long before it became money. Bitcoin had no value until it became money. But I don't think it can withstand the test of time. I don't think it represents a store of value. But let me tell you why.
But you say that though, but isn't we're not on the gold standard right now.
I know.
So our dollars are essentially just like Bitcoin.
Well, they're not just like it, but
not.
Well, the government won't accept bitcoins in payment of taxes.
The motherfuckers, they'll cave in eventually.
But let me tell you though, if I go to a store that accepts dollars and I pay with dollars, right? They don't sell my dollars. They use their dollars to pay their employees their wages. They use their dollars to pay their landlord the rent. They use their dollars to pay their salary. The employer, the owner of the business, takes the dollars, pays his mortgage, pays his tuition for his kid. I mean, everybody uses
paying and selling.
Here's what's going on with Bitcoin.
Different.
So a merchant decides to accept Bitcoin. They don't price their products in Bitcoin. What they do is they allow you to pay with Bitcoins using BitPay. But then what they do with those Bitcoins, the minute they get them, they sell them. Okay, so now the more merchants that accept Bitcoins, now all these Bitcoins are for sale. See, before, when very few people accepted them, everybody was hoarding them. And so the reason the price was going up is because nobody was actually spending, or very few people. But as more and more merchants accept them, now people take Bitcoins that they were hoarding and they go to spend them. But now the merchants want to get rid of them because they need dollars or euros or whatever their currency is. Who is going to buy them? Meanwhile, if you look at Bitcoins for the past...
Wow, it's almost exactly like the fundamental problem of using gold as a medium of exchange. It's almost exactly the same. So using gold, you'd haul around this gold and you would be more liable for theft because people knew you had the exact unit of an account on you and it was heavy and you could lose it, or you could just carry checks around or issues of IOUs and the bank could hold that money. And if someone stole your checkbook, it wouldn't mean anything because they couldn't write a check in your name. So this is exactly fundamentally the problem with using gold as a medium of exchange and why banking superseded it as just a superior way to do business.
Few months. They haven't been going up anymore. They stopped going up. I think it's a distribution top, most likely.
Right.
Oh, you did. Oh,
cut my finger off. Anyway, so
hey, what's up, everybody?
Fundamentally, again, the problem is, the problem with Bitcoin is you use dollars up into Bitcoins, over through Bitcoins, down to dollars again. So it's like a medium of exchange, but not actually even an account. So it's even less than what the libertarians are promising. Because fundamentally, you can't have an economy based on a hyper fluctuating underpinning part of a currency. Your currency can't double and then crash and then triple in price week after week and expect any kind of real economic activity to happen with those units because there's no actual attachment, once again, to real physical fundamental economics that are happening underneath it.
No, they think they're going to become billionaires if they just hold them long enough.
Like gold holders.
At some point, they're going to be worried about losing what they have rather than getting more. I think I think
then they're going to start using them.
They're going to try to get rid of them. Look, now is it possible that Bitcoins go to $2,000, $3,000? I don't know. I mean, sure, it's possible.
Is it possible?
But is it probable?
It's possible the gold does that. Who knows?
Well, no. I mean, because look. You go to this website called, it's coinvalue.com or some cryptocurrencies. There's like 60 or 70 digital currencies that have already been created. People talk about the fact that, there's only 21 million potential Bitcoins that can be mined into existence. But what they don't say is there's an unlimited number of alternative digital currencies that can be created that are identical to Bitcoin. Some might be better than Bitcoin, and so you can.
Oh, it's like bimetallism once again. So you can create as many other kind of currencies as you want, although the amount of gold is fixed. So this is the fundamental problem with gold. There's a limited amount of gold. Let's say we're in some primordial economy or something. There's a limited amount of gold. So hey, everybody, we shouldn't use this as how we denominate every amount of goods, because the amount of goods can grow independently of the supply of gold. So we'll have it denominated in, usually it was just credit, so it was just IOUs, and that was how most things functioned. But if you want to have some kind of metal standard, you can say it's gold and silver. Or you can say it's gold and silver in platinum, or gold and silver, platinum, copper, or whatever. Right, so once again, the whole problem is the amount of goods and services that can be created has nothing to do with the amount of gold that exists, nor the amount of gold that can be mined. And that's a fundamental problem of Bitcoin. It's a fundamental problem of the gold standard. But of course, Schiff is for the gold standard because he knows when the federal government goes to the gold holders and saying, we're on a gold standard again, he's going to Schiff Commodity Co. or, Commodity Inc., and they're going to have to ask him to, divest of a lot of gold, and he's going to get, fat payday, and that's all Schiff cares about, of course.
Keep creating them, and so what does that mean? And, people say, well, Bitcoin got here first, therefore it's always going to be the one that everybody wants. Well, does everybody use MySpace? Facebook was it? Does everybody
use gold?
Yeah. I mean, do you use AOL as your internet provider?
Always.
I mean, they were first. I mean, just because you're first, doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, right.
I mean, look, this is all but to me, I see a lot of similarities in the people who are irrationally defending, the Bitcoin
gold
to what I saw in the .com bubble or the real estate bubble. Look, I believe in sound money. I want to take power away from government. But, I think a lot of people, if they get into the Bitcoin market now, they're going to lose a lot of money. Even if it goes higher first, I think eventually it goes down. Now, I know there's a lot of people that got in early who have a vested interest in expanding the market so they can sell, they can cash out.
This is pretty amazing right now.
Yeah. It's like a tell-all book by Schiff. He's like, they got in early, let's say around year 2000 maybe. And they're long gold. I mean, Bitcoin. And they want to make sure that bubble grows more before they sell their gold. I mean, Bitcoin.
But they're not actively lobbying
the government. Lobbying for people to increase the value of gold.
To get the government.
I mean, Bitcoin.
To be gold standard.
Totally. I mean, the people look up to this guy as just like a degradation of public life and social commentaries. So sad.
And I know it makes me unpopular with some people because they want me out there. They want everybody in the hard money community. But I am an equal opportunity bubble spotter. I mean, I'm not going to let my ideology get in my way.
Except if it's gold, because that's where I'm going to profit from. If it's about popping any of these other bubbles that I'm not invested in, I'm your guy. I'm your go-to guy. If it's about popping the bubble that I'm in, then hey, I got to look out for Schiff. Got to look out for number one.
So if I see a housing bubble, it's a bubble. If it looks like a duck and it walks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, it's a duck. I don't care if I have something philosophically in common with people who are anti-Fed.
Yeah, I don't care if I have something philosophically in common. I only care about my goddamn pocketbook.
Yeah,
because that's where the rubber meets the road for Schiff.
I just don't think that the Bitcoin now.
Notice that was the end of the conversation. I don't care if there's philosophical differences. ...
Similarities. Right?
Period. That's it. No, nothing more to say here.
Currency backed by gold. I can be on board with that because if you go back, the original paper money, right?
Schiff, you're so transparent. You're. I just want to pinch your cheek and give you a chocolate chip cookie.
Was backed by gold, and it was issued by private banks, not a government. It was like the original warehouse receipt from a goldsmith. They had your gold, and they would issue an IOU, and it would circulate.
Somehow there's corruptible institutions and non-corruptible institutions in Schiff's mind, and somehow those always line up with public institution, corruptible, private, somehow just infallible, and just for no reason, because that's where the profit is, and so therefore that's where Schiff is. So you just imagine him just shrugging the whole time, just. I gotta look out for Schiff.
Have a stockpile of gold somewhere.
Yeah, but you'd have something real. Right now you don't know. So you can't put your savings into Bitcoin at $1,000. There's no history of value to Bitcoin. I mean, how much is Bitcoin worth? I mean, they mentioned some guy sells bought it.
The difference is you can create as many cryptocurrencies as you want. That's true. Sure. Yeah. So gold doesn't have that problem as endlessly replicate different kinds of currencies. But by the same token, like I said a few other times, you can infinitely replicate what you want to denominate credit in. So fundamentally, they're almost identical.
A house for $7 million worth of bitcoins. Well, are you going to accept 7 million bitcoins for your house?
I would. Fuck, that's a lot more than the value of a house. 7 million bitcoins is like tens of millions of dollars right now. Yeah. I'll take that. Anyone wants. Yeah, send your treasury bonds, your Federal Reserve notes, and all your bitcoins set on the address, and you can just send me as much as you'd like.
Bitcoins will be worth next year. I sold my house for this pile of bitcoins. The only reason you'll do that is because you can dump your bitcoins on the market and get something else. There's no real.
Same with gold. So if you would send me your gold, I would turn it in for dollars and then pay off some debt, buy some things.
Right in the ground.
Point being, Schiff has no point.
Frame of reference. And
this is very recent, though, and very new. How old is Bitcoin?
They're just a few years old.
Well, the dollar bill is how old?
Well, the ones that are not backed by nothing started in 1971.
Isn't that like looking at a baby and go, this little motherfucker is not going to be shit. He can't talk. He doesn't know how to change his own diapers.
The only reason
going to amount to anything.
But the only reason the dollar worked for a while, not backed by gold.
It's just piercing insights that are just like cut through all the nonsense that Schiff's saying, and then Schiff's just once again patching up the dam. Yeah. Just furiously.
Analogies.
Yeah.
It doesn't work very well is because it had a history of being backed by something. So the public was kind of fooled. They were using currency backed by real money.
It's not anymore.
Yeah.
So as this little baby, this Bitcoin baby grows up, he's going to realize this dollar that everybody's been holding over my head as being superior is just older.
Yeah. Well, look, if you
look at some old asshole that just happens to be your dad but doesn't know fucking jack shit about the way the world runs, and he's...
The dollar is superior in many ways because the Federal Reserve, for all their faults and problems and corruption, they preserve a short-term stability of the currency. Idea of QE, we've already covered. It's to debase labor. It's to lower the value of the currency. Yeah. But in the short run, their idea is always to maintain the value and stability of the currency, which is useful because that's the exact problem Bitcoin has with being used as a medium of exchange and a unit of account, is you can't do that because there's no central bank maintaining the value of it as a part of an institutional position to do that. So when there's no one to do that, it doesn't get done. And as an effect of it not getting done, you have a wildly speculative value of the currency in which no real economic activity can be done because no one's going to build any plants, factories, equipment, hire any workers based on something that could be half as much a week from now or double as much a week from now. You can't have economic relations in such a situation because the relationship of debt is just fundamentally totally unstable in that situation. You need to have a fundamental underpinning and stability to those relationships for anyone to take that kind of risk on.
Telling you how to live your life. Meanwhile, he's a fucking mess. Maybe Bitcoin's going to grow up. Maybe Bitcoin's a little baby that doesn't know shit now, but one day Bitcoin's going to grow up and realize, you know what? There's a better way.
Well, I think that it's the people buying them that would grow up. But there is people get used to it. Like if you look at the money that we have now, the change. You look at a quarter, right? You think it's if you look at the ridges of a quarter, at the side of a quarter, you'll see that it's got these ridges on the sides. And people say, well, why are they there? Why are there these ridges? And why is a quarter even silver in color? Because it's mostly made of copper. And it's coated with a little bit of zinc. Mm-hmm. But why does the government go through the process of binding zinc to copper? And why do they go through the expense of making all these little ridges on the sides of the coin? Well, it's because the coins were originally made of silver. And the ridges were there, so you couldn't you couldn't clip the coin, because when it was valuable silver, people would try to take some of the silver off the coin and then spend it.
But when quaint anecdotal stories, nice. It's just so cute. It's just back then it was made of silver, so it's worth something. And so, once again, fundamental problem. The amount of value that can be created by human creativity is far beyond the amount that can be represented by silver or gold, because whenever you denominate it in a certain amount of silver or gold, you're fixing it into some kind of present condition. And as soon as that situation becomes untenable, or you can move beyond that situation, that gold becomes like a gold shackles, or whatever Lou Garrison was using, right? Gold, cross of gold. It no longer is what's driving the economy, human creativity, but some kind of fixation on some kind of fetishism with some kind of previous gold standard. Totally unhelpful.
The government, nobody is going to clip the copper.
Is that why those old coins are always fucked up and they're never like totally circular?
No.
You see like old Roman coins, they're just worn out.
They're just worn out. Most likely, if it's a Roman coin, it's worn out. But but when it originally made quarters, when they took the silver out, they made it look like the old silver coins, even though there was no silver in there. It was like people were used to silver coins, and so when the government debased them, that's where the word debase comes from. It's a Roman.
Yeah, but there's some people that don't read. Yeah, don't read. That's I guess the end of that sentence. Is that that seems like a real, hey, you've been really fooled here, and these people are really playing you for a sucker, because you used to have silver in your currency, now you don't anymore. Making that the point of fixation is just so diabolical. Manipulating ignorance into fear, into their desired political outcome, which is, more power for them,
gold standard.
Fuck labor, gold standard, we're going to crush you completely. You think you've seen poverty? Wait until you're on a gold standard, baby. We're going to fucking fuck you. And it's going to be over, having us fixated on some kind of commodity based on, we're going to make the supply of money fixated on something that I own. So you have to go to Schiff in order to get this commodity in order to, issue credit, issue anything, when all that credit should be based on, as Quigley succinctly put, it's a debt based on a future value to pay. And that can be based on something that we can do a lot better than on gold. I can double your living standard in 5 years with the right economic program. But that is, once again, based on ingenuity, creativity, technology, productivity, things that gold has nothing to do with, and it's antithetical to. Schiff represents Schiff, of course.
Romans, debase their currency by putting base metal into the currency instead of gold, right? So, but
ooh la la, because allowing credit to increase proportionally to the value of goods and services that's debasement. Look at the Chinese money supply. Once again, even like Jim Rickards, this old crank, was like, I want to invest as much as I can in the renminbi, totally ignoring the fact that the money supply is growing highly, but it's proportional to the amount of goods and services because they invest in infrastructure, because they invest in energy, because they invest in technology. These are things that give returns, not gold.
Not gold.
They dumb you down over time. But now our money is just tokens. We don't have any real money. And we have fiat, we have counterfeit paper, we have tokens for coins. We have we have this monetary system that is the root cause of, all these problems that we have, and I think it's all coming to a head. I think,
it's original sin. The apple was bitten into, and therefore all the crimes. All our evils flow from this position of economics that Schiff is, saying. It's just piling it all on, just saying that this is the source of all your life's problems. Do what I say, things will be better, based on my shoddy, slipshod, low attention span worldview that I've set out, where I contradict myself constantly. As long as it's not within the same 10 minutes, then you're too dumb to realize it, and I'm going to take advantage of you. It's just so cynical, man. It's just disgusting.
End of the game now, and it's about to blow up. And the 2008, that financial crisis, that was the beginning of the end. It wasn't the end of it, right? The real crash is coming. That's why if you go and look at my book, the book that I wrote, Crash Proof, that came.
Yeah, it's like the global warming hysterics. It's always right around the corner. Be afraid. Be afraid. Be afraid. Be afraid. Eventually, they keep hearing that, and they're like, "Meh, I've heard that before. I'm still alive." Apparently, you're full of shit because, like these forecasters and The Economist, who's going to really look back to them in 2030?
No one.
No one. It's just totally. It's all pursuing a right here and now, in the now, political end to which you're the butt of the joke. And if you agree to it, then you're the sucker. And if you're agreeing to Peter Schiff, there's different groups, there's different gangs that want to fool you for different purposes. Schiff just represents a different gang. But, to be fooled by him is still to totally be actively hostile to your own interests. And anyway.
The crash that I was writing about isn't the one that happened in 2008, even though I predicted that crash. The crash that I was worried about was the one that's coming. The one that was going to be a consequence of what I knew the government was going to do to artificially stimulate the economy after the 2008 financial crisis. I was against the government bailouts and the stimulus before the government even knew they were going to do it.
Yeah. So there's three main camps, and almost no one in the establishment sphere, I'd say probably no one, represents, because to represent the position that we represent here is to be completely opposed to the establishment. Schiff wants the deflationary crash. The modern mainstream wants the continued QE. And they've learned a lesson. I mean, it's kind of laudable. I mean, like, if it takes them an extra 100 years to learn that the credit stimulus is the way to go, at least they aren't repeating the Andrew Mellon position of the deflationary crash. At least they've learned something from the 1930s implosion. For these low-grade characters like Bernanke, you got to say, like, hey, at least you're evolving. It's slowly than the rest of us, but it's something. Because to have QE is much less worse than a deflationary crash. Deflationary crashes destroy countries. You have basically a deflationary crash is where 2008 never turns around. And at the pits of 2008, that's perpetual. There's no demand for any goods and services. Unemployment is massive. You have 40% unemployment. If 2008 would have continued, it would have destroyed the country. You would have revolution, secessionism, civil war, all kinds of that, totalitarianism, dictatorship, that kind of stuff comes about by massive unemployment, by massive deflation. So the amount of debt you owe is fixed, but the amount of credit that exists in the modern system is much less than what existed when you took on those debts. So just in keeping everything else consistent, imagine that your amount of debt you have doubles, but your means to pay it off shrinks or stays the same. Wouldn't that be... Imagine your mortgage just doubling one day and just saying, you owe twice as much now, fuck you. That's the position of the bank. That's what deflation does. Because the means to pay off future debts is shrunk massively, but those debts still perpetuate. Much worse than hyperinflation.
Exactly what they were going to do. And unfortunately, I was right about that. And that's, my book that's out now, my most recent book, other than the one I just gave you on how an economy grows and why it crashes, the real crash, that's out. That's coming.
Take a breath. People, we're not going to buy your book. How an economy grows and when it crashes.
And why it crashes.
Why it crashes. Yeah. Okay. How an
You
economy...
can't take a breath because it's like a used car salesman.
Goes and why it crashes. Peter Schiff, SCHIFF. Buy it. Go to Amazon right now, you fucks.
Oh, God.
All right, so we figured out.
Logan.
We figured out. Fuck Lake Michigan.
Well, that was your idea.
Scenario. We can't really kill off Lake Michigan. I love Lake Michigan. Don't get me wrong. Okay. The Department of Public Education, or Department of Education rather, Department of Energy, the government itself needs to shrink down. We need to have a gold-based economy. Is it possible?
Gold-based monetary system, but real money.
Gold-based.
Oh, now he's in
the
specifics.
Not the guys in Congress now. They don't know what they're talking about.
What do you think about?
Yeah, it's like Rand Paul. Once again, I got to cite the 2012 inauguration or the State of the Union address, and Rand Paul had the counter. They had it was one of those things where the Republicans had 4 counter arguments, because they're just fractioning into all these tiny little. But Rand Paul is radically. They all left Britain to oppose the system of heavy government, and they wanted free trade. Wow! Have you not even read the Federalist Papers? I mean, not even getting into the in-depth 18-volume sets of Hamilton, Washington, or anybody. Even just the most basic, rudimentary history is totally opposed to what you're saying.
Yeah.
It's shocking. This is the degradation of modern political life, that they can say something so blatantly false, and no one will say, hey, you're full of shit.
Finances. Is it possible to have other resources and have our economy based or our finances based on other resources?
Not really. I think the reason that gold became money. Remember,
Rogan, once again, not so good with the knowledge aspect of this argument, but his capacity to reason and to think is great. That's why he has this huge show and this huge following, because he has a great mind. And so even without the knowledge of reading all the history, he's hey, he just natively knows, hey, if we denominate things in gold, why can't we do it in silver and also platinum, right? Because they're fixed too. Schiff's nah, not really. You can't really do that. The whole bimetallism movement of the 1890s and 1900s didn't exist. Founding fathers were all hard money, Austrian. They all left the Austrian school of economics to start the revolution.
Made gold money. The people made gold money, and governments just recognize that fact. It's because gold was better suited, right? It was a better commodity to serve as money than any other commodity.
How did they originally get people to give up things for gold, though?
It's better than silver, even though silver is much lighter. So there you go. Silver wins. Gold's much heavier.
Donkeys were worth a lot. You can carry things with your donkey. How'd someone get you a stupid piece of metal?
Well, people always valued gold all around the world. I don't know, because it's pretty, because it's it's a very good metal, because it's very good. It's malleable. It doesn't tarnish.
Once again, Rogan's already way past Schiff, and just,
why would I give you my donkey for a piece of gold? That's where we're at right now. It's shiny and it's malleable.
My donkey carries stuff around for me. Back in the day, fertilizer manure was really important. Henry Carey's talking about when you're driving your grain to market, how you're losing all the manure on the roads. Back in Harmony of Interest, or even his other book, Past, Present, and Future, that was a big deal, right? Because nitrogen production of any living animal was really useful for your garden and for your crops. And you didn't want to lose that on the road, transferring your grain. Rogan, once again, sees past what is useful for human life. And gold doesn't meet any of those criteria. But Schiff's nah, it's pretty. I'll give you this piece of gold. You can give me your donkey, which I can use to go plow my fields and eat and survive. Schiff.
There's a Spanish ship that sinks, 500 years ago. If you can find the gold, it's in perfect condition. They have
fairly rare,
but it's also you can take gold and you can.
Imagine a donkey. Imagine a Spanish galleon going down and a donkey being in. What use is that donkey going to be? Hey, the Schiff, you got us there, Schiff.
Yep, 500-year-old donkey is not too valuable.
You can make things out of it because it's very easy. You can smash it down into a very thin strip, very fine pieces. So it's good.
He's you can divide it more, but it's still fundamentally worthless. Mm-hmm. It's once again totally skirting the argument.
It's good for you can make dishes. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things that it's useful for.
Yeah, it's great.
It was a symbol of wealth, right? If you were wealthy, you had gold. Either you wore gold.
So it's fiat.
It's fiat. Yeah.
Symbol. He said nothing really there. He said a lot of nothing.
It's a whole bunch of nothing. Whole bunch of honey.
You had it in your house. You had gold, vases, or you had gold.
Vase.
In gilded wood. Gold was just people valued it everywhere.
Yeah.
People valued it everywhere.
Yeah, back in the day. I remember. Hey kids, remember back in the day when I lived in 2014? Bitcoin. It was valued everywhere. People were trading stuff for it. It was valued all over the place.
Put it in wood.
These arguments.
Base out of your Bitcoin.
Fundamentally, no different. Totally skirting the argument. You can mold it into stuff. You can make fillings out of it. Hey, that's useful.
That is useful.
Money, because people realize that whatever you needed, you can pay for it with gold. Even if you didn't need the gold, you knew you can give it to somebody else who valued it.
Hey, kind of like those Federal Reserve notes nowadays, or Treasury bonds, or Bitcoins. You could exchange things that had a certain fixed value, or that there was a limited supply of, for things that had a objective value. Wow. Blowing my mind, Schiff.
And it's scarce. It's not like there's gold everywhere. You can't just trip over it. Mm-hmm. So it's rare, and people like it.
What if they find a new pocket of gold, though?
You're predictable.
But they're not going to.
Like they found this underwater freshwater lake in Antarctica under the glaciers, gigantic freshwater lake like the size of an ocean. What if they dig in and they find some gold somewhere and oh shit, gold is like aluminum, it's everywhere.
But they haven't. They haven't done it yet. Right. They're not going. There are people saying,
"Well, devil's advocate kind of guy, Peter Schiff."
Look, you got people saying, maybe there's gold in outer space. Maybe there's gold in asteroids. How expensive is that?
Ron Paul moon mission 2020, going to Mars to get the gold.
The only way we can get a space program from Ron Paul is if there's gold on Mars.
President Ron Paul, Vice President Rand Paul. We want to go to Mars. There's gold on them there hills.
That rocks. Okay,
well, that's the fringe conspiracy theory of why we like gold in the first place. It has to do with the Anunnaki. Do you know the whole story of Zecharia Sitchin? Do you know who that guy is?
No.
Biblical. You shouldn't. I shouldn't even tell you. But he wrote a bunch of series of books.
Spare us.
The Sumerian text, the oldest written language that we're aware of, and one of the things that he believes the Sumerian text depicts is that the Anunnaki is this race of beings that created human beings,
nowadays is
and they
a
live on
known
a planet
quantity.
that's in an
Everything
elliptical
in the
orbit that
future
comes
is
around near Earth every
boring,
3,600
so we've got to obsess
years,
about
and they need gold to
weird
sustain
hypnotic
their
trances
atmosphere.
that mystics in the
particles
4,000 years ago were all
they
eating
ruin our
like
atmosphere,
random
their atmosphere,
chemicals.
sort of like the way we've ruined ours, like the twin China's fucking up.
Whatever psychedelic thing they could get their hands on.
Their atmosphere too. So they have to
very interesting to run subjective experience, highly useless to our modern day predicaments.
But I would surmise this. My guess would be, and I'm sure there's intelligent life on other planets. We're not the only planet to have evolved the way we did. But I bet that, if there's intelligent life on other planets, that they're going to value gold. If you can somehow go to
get some, Peter Schiff, right there. That should be on your Twitter profile.
That should be on his tombstone when he's buried. No matter where you are in the universe,
gold.
The gold is where it is. That's value.
Accepted everywhere.
Hey, let's say antimatter fusion warp drives. Who cares about that, baby? I got gold in my teeth. It's like a picture of like dirty old bastard like pointing to his grill, like smiling with like thug life.
For Federal Reserve notes, no one's going to give you anything for them.
Do you think if there's intelligent life on other planets, it's a million years
probably not true.
Currency?
If you can still exchange it for stuff.
The fundamentally, like anything of any value that is commodity based will eventually not be totally supplanted. If you ever develop fusion energy, gold is worthless because you can make gold out of energy. Energy becomes so plentiful, E equals mc squared. You can make mass out of energy, and energy is so cheap and inexhaustible that you can just make whatever you want. Hey, gold, shit, that's low down on the periodic table. I'll make you Americanium. I'll make you Einsteinium. I'll make you super heavies that are a exotic form of matter that they don't even know exist yet, that are beyond the periodic table, and they think there's a potentially, theoretically, that there's a whole island of actual super stable elements beyond the periodic table that aren't radioactive, that don't decay, and that you can make those, right? So like something that's fundamentally like so rare it doesn't even exist in the natural universe and has to be created by technological innovation. That's valuable, right? I mean, that's rare. You're talking about rare. I'll create you something that's never been created before out of the Big Bang.
Well, I mean, ahead of us in what way? That
Everything. They've been alive longer.
Well, but just because they've been around longer doesn't mean that they've advanced more. But
true.
if
Doesn't
they
mean they're
have
throwing a
advanced,
gold standard.
Yeah, maybe.
Hey, aliens, you want a gold standard or not?
What are
That's
the
my
aliens
litmus
that are on the
test.
gold standard?
Us.
Them, us, and they're the Scientology aliens.
Yeah.
They're on the gold standard too. The whole Battlefield Earth was about gold.
Oh my god, that's why they never left their home planet, I guess. That's why they just killed themselves with nuclear war or something like that, because they're obsessed about fucking gold.
chances are they do have sound money. Because I do think that if you have...
Yeah, if you're going to assert just totally radical, non-historical ideas on this planet, why limit them to this planet?
Yeah.
Why not say they apply to the whole universe?
The
whole universe is on a gold standard because I say so. Why not?
Who are you to prove different?
free markets and sound money, you're going to achieve a lot more. And I can only imagine how much more we would have achieved in America.
It's totally despicable.
We had more freedom and sound money for the past several decades. I mean, I think it would be night and day.
Why not? We'd be flying cars.
Aliens equal free market. So imagine what you would do with Bigfoot.
No, that's if they're advanced. I mean, there could be aliens that are living in the Stone Age.
Once again, Rogan's like right on point with like the level of the mythology going on. Although he's not able to combat it in the actual level of knowledge in his history, he totally sees right through like the weaves that he's proposing.
I don't know. I mean, I know. Look. Nobody is advanced enough to get here, right? No one's visiting us, or at least I guess if they're advanced enough to not let us know that they're here. But
so all these people that are talking about UFOs are liars? Is that what you're saying, Peter Schiff?
Well, they might have a vivid imagination, most likely. Most likely.
Yeah, like the whole universe being on a gold standard, for example.
But look, it's not impossible. I mean, I'm not going to be naive to think that out of all of the billions of stars,
well, as a descendant to aliens. With 7 minutes left, I'm ending it. I'm ending the torture of Peter Schiff and Joe Rogan.
So now we're talking about aliens. I guess it's a good point to wrap it up.
7 minutes left in that.
So what have we learned from this 2.5 hour? We've extrapolated what he's talked because it's so densely packed of lies, ideology, enclosed ways of thinking, primitive absolutisms of the whole universe must be in a gold standard because it must be. It can't be in any other way than how I dictate to you it must be because if that's the only way it can be, because that's the only way it can be, because that's the only way it can be. Circular logic in the extreme. What have we learned? I mean, Schiff makes a great example because he hits on all the major topics of what a modern libertarian would believe. That's why it's useful to go after Schiff because he's so outspoken. He loves sticking not only one but both of his feet in his mouth constantly. So he's useful to attack because he's a big target. Shameless.
This sort of self-serving demagogue that is just full of shit and talks about...
Yeah, and he's more out in the open. He's more public in the spotlight than most people. But this is why this rhetoric exists. This is why this ideology exists, is to provide a smokescreen for self-serving political interests, for self-serving economic interests. Every step of the way. It was Schiff is in gold. Bitcoin, you're going to be wasting your money on that. You should get into my bubble, baby. Mm-hmm. My bubble is better than their bubble. I will treat you right. I will wine and dine you. And the other bubbles ain't going to treat you good, baby. So you should come over to the gold bubble. Just every step of the way, just total self-serve, total self-interestedness. And they use this veneer of libertarianism to provide this defense that they're doing something for the greater good. They're doing something in the public interest. Yeah, what did we learn? We learned nothing. We wasted 8 hours talking about a non-thing. But the less people buying into this garbage, the more people are able to contribute to actual, really looking at objective reality, looking at history for what it is, with all its flaws, with all its triumphs, embracing that reality, and then working from reality to a point of what can be used to solve our problems. That's where you start. You can't start from an ideological position, because if you're in Schiff land, like he said, anything is possible. He's saying that the universe, not even just the galaxy, with its 75 million star systems or whatever the hell it is, or habitable planets that they now think exist in our galaxy. So it's beyond just any kind of imagination of which we can
fathom.
Space
is big, and it's all on a gold standard.
Yeah. Not even just the galaxy.
Based on
the entire universe.
Yeah, because it's such a good system that it's just what should be. Ever being able to explain anything about it.
The most prideful god emperor that has ever existed in the barbarous past. Like, you imagine Xerxes of the 300 movie,
Yeah.
Xerxes being more humble than Peter Schiff. And not saying that, what I know goes to the entire universe. It's a shift, though. It's all a land of imagination. If you want to participate in this world, you're God. You don't need to read history. You don't need to learn anything.
The goal of this was to give people a blueprint to how to beat these arguments when you encounter them. Because if you're a public credit type of person, you run into libertarians all the time.
It's a huge way of thinking. I'd say, the right-wing poison way of thinking is one way. And I would even trace this all the way in my own research. I would trace it back to Ricardo versus Malthus. You're looking at the turn of the 19th century, early 1800. Malthus, his position was on ecology, building out a state of ecology, a state of population growth, fraud theory. And then you're looking at Ricardo, which is based on monetarism. It's based on hard money. Government should only exist in this feudal mindset of perpetuating contract law, property rights, military defense. That's it. There should be no higher aims of government, of self-government, that we shouldn't aim higher of what we can do as a species. That's all baked into this dialogue, this crap, garbage, shit dialogue that we have to deal with, right? So it's either, if I even make a claim against libertarianism, I'm a leftist somehow. Online, I go between being I'm seldom called a right-winger, but it happens. But then I'm called a commie or a socialist.
Yeah, it's just labels that people can use.
It's like you have two labels for stuff, and neither of them actually fit historical reality. Mm-hmm. And so if I'm not one, I got to be the other. And neither of them is useful. Neither of them is helpful. Neither of them is what I represent. Neither of them is what I'm about. And so both of them are useless. Both of them are just the different flavors of right-wingism are not that different. You have republicanism, modern Republican Party, and libertarianism, which are becoming more and more the same thing. Mm-hmm. And the veil is falling off. And to maintain that there's any real ideological difference between these two positions is just harder and harder to try to pretend that that's the case, because it's clearly not.
Especially with people like Rand Paul being pro-war.
Yeah, look at their economics. That's where stem all other things. And so if their economics are identical, they're the same. It's a tiger with different stripes. It's a wolf in sheep's clothing. Fundamentally, it's the same. And it's that money and the systems the axioms by which we understand the money system to exist, cannot attack these. These are the sacred cows. Because this is by which the rich people, by which the 1% is able to perpetuate their existence. So therefore, you don't attack them. That's what Schiff is defending. Fundamentally, he's not going after money as such. It's always after some conceived abuse of the money power, that you should adhere to some kind of absurd, non-existent Founding Fathers consensus which existed on these standards, which never existed. Hard money and honest money. Quigley was hitting those points. Right, that the idea of hard money and all this stuff is a banker-contrived position. That they created these ideologies because it defends their interest. And the interest of the bankers is completely antithetical to the interest of working people, consumers, producers, all of that. This is what Schiff represents. This is what we'll get in a lot more in depth on talking about the history of this ideology, because this is just its most modern connotation, right? It's like, what are the populist things you can grab that will grab a large portion of the population and bound them to your own position? It's anti-war on drugs, right? So you want to make marijuana legal, you want to make decriminalized drugs, and you want to get out of war. So young people, they're sick of war, and they're sick of the police state and the throwing the book at people for smoking a joint and all that kind of stuff. Great, yeah. People should be against those things. Mm-hmm. But the problem is they attach all this feudal system of money on top of that and say, you got to be for these things too because they're inseparable. You can't be for one and not the other. Against the criminalization of marijuana and the police state, that means you want a gold standard. Because these are all packaged together. I'm compressing these systems into one system, and you got to be for these. And it's just completely and utterly anti-historical. And of course, once again, out of Schiff, where does that drive us? What do we want to learn? We don't want to learn anything. Schiff makes it all very convenient, very well packaged. You're buying a prepackaged ideology. Me and Evan, we try to hit on these topics of history, but it's expansive. It is endless. Having a really good memory helps. My memory is not particularly great. It's not particularly bad. But, to go and read hundreds of books on history and to get these positions, that takes a lot of time.
Does.
And from Schiff's position, why would you even bother? Because you know that the Founding Fathers were pro-hard money. He says so.
Honest money, really.
Honest money.
Really, it's just honest money. It's my favorite term.
Who could be against such a thing?
Honest money.
It's setting things up in like how the cops interrogate. Like if I ask you the question, does your dad ever stop raping you?
It's pretty loaded.
Yeah. So if you answer no, then he never stops raping you. If you answer yes, then your dad does stop raping you. Therefore, he rapes you.
Yeah.
So to say yes or no is already to concede everything to the opponent. And that's how all these things are loaded. Honest money. One of many. Free market, right? Who could be against a free market?
Sounds so nice.
It's so idyllic. It's just, who could be against such a thing?
Sounds like a farmer's market.
What a crank I am to be against a free market. Who am I to oppose a free market?
I'm like some sort of...
I'm some Trotskyist. Yeah. Some Trotskyist sitting over here with my, sipping my latte. I'm the elitist, right? Of course, when a Schiff, who's literally a fucking millionaire, is literally engaging everyone to act in a hostile relationship to their own best interests. What's in your interest if you're a working person? That's not what Schiff is representing. To buy gold, of course. That's Schiff. That is Schiff. Once again, to hit on libertarianism. Libertarianism has been around for a long time. It's been around for hundreds of years. It exists. It changes its stripes constantly. It's a chameleon. It's constantly changing what its public PR front is. Because it knows if it came out and said what it really is for, people wouldn't be in favor of that. I'm for crushing deflation. I'm for, this is Schiff, right? I want you to just, have nothing but your eyes to console you, because these people in positions of finance capital, as Quigley was talking about in that beautiful quote, are in a position to obfuscate and to bury and to complicate what finance is about. And that's why people have no interest in economics. And they're largely right, because they don't want to get engaged in this, mired down into this position of...
Like the only person in class talking about full employment.
Yeah.
Just getting yelled at.
Oh, you don't understand.
Why
you don't
can't
comprehend.
We have this?
You don't comprehend these. You don't get... Quit wasting our time. If you go against the grain, you're a moron. You're an idiot. You don't understand.
You just don't have...
Just shut up.
Look at this graph we made. It explains everything just quite perfectly.
Yeah.
About why we can't have full employment.
People were right in the post-New Deal era to scoff at academic economic profession. Galbraith said, economics is best for, what was the quote exactly?
I don't know.
The whole role of economics is to employ economists. And that's basically, to paraphrase, that's what he was saying. Because fundamentally, unless they're on the side of labor and working people, then they're on the side of finance. And that's really the only dichotomy you need to know about this whole thing, is that bankers have a different interest that is antithetical to working people. That's the dichotomy. And nowhere that Peter Schiff is talking about brings up that dichotomy. He wants to try to bury that between these obfuscations of state versus people, bureaucrats versus everyone else. For Schiff, it's not the 99% versus the 1%. It's the 100% versus the bureaucracy, which just exists to perpetuate bureaucracy, I guess. It's totally radically anti-historical, and we're going to go into it further in looking at the past eras of libertarianism, neoliberal economics, liberalism, which is now somehow the left. The left is called liberals. The right is more radical versions of liberals. So I really cringe. I have a digestive reaction when I hear whenever I'm called a liberal. I feel slightly sick to my stomach.
Yeah.
No one should want to be called a liberal, because it's all based on a false spectrum of neoliberal economics, which the Founding Fathers were not, which they were hostile to largely, except for Jefferson and Madison, which, according to the libertarian worldview, were the only Founding Fathers. There's only two. So they're like the Founding Bros. There weren't even a lot of them. There were two of them. And they're both identical and everything. Anyway, that's libertarianism in a nutshell. Totally garbage. At every step of the way, self-interested behavior. It's a smokescreen. It's a shoddy Potemkin village. These cardboard cutouts representing history, representing rigorous system of economics. It is none of the above.
When you argue with libertarians, just cite go historical on all your arguments.
Go historical on their ass.
Yeah, don't project premises they'll have, and they'll be really slippery the way Peter Schiff is. Just hammer them down. Make them explain things.
Make them make a constructive, point-based commentary or program based on modern-day reality. What do they want to do? Okay, libertarian, you're in charge, which is already totally hypocritical and totally antithetical to what you say you're about. Running as a libertarian, it seems kind of ironic, right? So Rand Paul gets into office as president as someone that probably doesn't even think that the presidency should exist, or not into the full scope of powers that it has through the Constitution. Now, what do you do as president? And that's where you get them down every time, because what they want to do is either utopian and completely impossible, or completely hostile to working people's living standards. And that's what it's for. That's why it exists. That's why it's always existed. That's why Adam Smith exists. That's why he's paid by Lord Shelburne to write his garbage. Mm-hmm. That's why he's perpetuated. That's why he was made prominent in intellectual circles in London. That's why the slavocrats of the South subscribed to those ideologies. That's why J.B. Say in France took on Smith and then became his kind of unholy gospel. If Adam Smith is Jesus, then J.B. Say is Paul, the proselytizer of his ideology, and making it into a high science. That's why all these other people came out of it. It's a perfect smokescreen, right? If you're the 1%, you can't say, we're the 1%, we love ourselves, we are gods, we're God's chosen people, fuck everyone else, we hate you, we despise you, we want to see you die in the streets because we have such hate in our hearts, and because we're removed from the rest of the population from this arbitrary position of power, and so therefore we think we're above everyone else, and we're beyond humanity, and we're not a part of it.
They're trying to sell you this through libertarianism.
Yeah, so you should accept this existing arbitrary and irrational power structure. Because libertarianism, it's like the ultimate deus ex machina, right? Because libertarianism. You should accept an increasing decline in your living standards because libertarianism.
Because it fits this model that all the founding fathers have. Just ask me.
Psst, don't look at what they actually wrote.
No.
And don't worry, we already know that we've debased the people enough. They're dumbed down enough already where they're not going to actually even go read what they said. We'll just say so.
I have money, so I'm smart.
It's all self-justifying. It's all completely cynical. It's disgusting. Completely opposed to the American ideal of self-governance, the revolutionary mindset. Yet, that's what he says they're all about. This is the problem of ideology. That if you subscribe to a prepackaged way of viewing the world, you lose by default because you're buying into someone else's script. And unless you use your own capacity to reason and to look at the world, and also, you're unique. So your view of how you're going to see the world is going to be fundamentally different and fundamentally important from how anyone else could see the world. That's your own gift of life. And to just give that away to some libertarian because he's saying this is how things are is just so... how much better would we see historical reality if everyone was engaged in the process of actually trying to derive what it was, what that is, right? Because it's not totally cut and dry and known. Nothing is ever totally known. And with so much of the population not participating in this process and just throwing their hands up in the air and just resigning themselves to be a libertarian, totally overrides their own human ability to improve truth with capital T of what is the truth of the matter. You give up on that fight if you're an ideologue. If you're a Marxist, if you're a Green, if you're a libertarian, you give up right off the gate. You say, this is too hard, I don't want to participate. I just resign myself to be a libertarian or whatever.
Which is one of the reasons why Rogan is such a good interviewer, is because he doesn't have any ideology.
The ideology is reason itself, which is not an ideology at all, but from which all these systems, seek to disrupt and destroy. They want to destroy your capacity to reason.
And so you stick to the script.
Fundamentally, you buy into the myth that you're too dumb to understand these things. You buy into your own self-degradation by saying, I'm an ideologue, because these things are too fundamentally scary for me to participate in understanding what they're about, and for me to self-govern my own mindset, and for me to have a sovereign understanding of what the truth is, and not to pursue these things myself. I'm going to let Schiff, the most blatantly self-interested charlatan, tell me what's what.
He flipped his points of view quite often.
You don't even have to have a knowledge of history, but just a 5-minute memory to understand that he is constantly flip-flopping and implying all kinds of things that are totally hypocritical. So I hope that everyone that hears this, if you had any traces of even libertarian thinking or if you're a libertarian, or even if we're still maintaining some axioms of libertarian thought that you didn't even know you had, but came out as part of this dialogue, that you can leave those behind. Because they aren't serving you, they're not serving humanity, they're not serving your family, they're not serving your country, they're not serving anything.
You can be anti-war and anti-drug war and not be a libertarian.
Newsflash. So I hope everyone that hears this will no longer be a libertarian, will at least hang that up. The system that is fundamentally human is reason itself, from which everything that we have, we owe. So ideology itself is antithetical to that. So leave ideology behind, and by understanding, learning history objectively If that's even I like that word because it's not been abused as so many other words, In the English language, we're so degraded in terms of what words mean. Objective seems like one of those semi-safe words I can retreat back to, and people know what I mean. But anyway, ideology is not good. We're opposed to it.
Yeah.
It's not fundamentally human to be an ideologue, and we hope you'll leave it behind.
Skateboard, and you're listening to UCY.TV.